Great. So thank you all again for joining us this afternoon. I want to start by welcoming everyone to the Western Library Subscription Forum. My name is Mary Wegman, and I'm the Director of Collections for the Western Libraries. So before starting in this role in September of this year, I was the Assistant Director of Collections for 3 years. So I've been involved in subscription review at Western since fiscal year 23. And I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk with you all today. So I have a short slide deck that's about 20 minutes to share with you for the first portion of the forum before we turn to questions and discussion during the second half of the forum. So before we get started, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded, and we plan to post the recording with closed captions, as well as a slide deck, to the library website later this month. So the content will be available for anyone who wants to go back to review anything or to share it with colleagues who were not able to join us this afternoon. I also wanted to acknowledge and thank the Dean of Libraries, Madeline Kelly, for developing this slide deck for the subscriptions forum last year when Western Libraries started to encounter the need for annual subscription cancellations. I've updated it slightly to reflect this year's budget scenario. And then I also invite you to submit any questions that you have during the presentation via the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the slide deck. And if there are any questions that we don't answer today, if we either run out of time or if I need to find additional information, I'll be happy to follow up with you directly, as well as share the answers on the subscription review FAQ on the library's website. So during today's forum, I'm going to share a broad overview of library collections and costs. I'll talk about the current subscriptions budget and why we need to make cancellations. I'll share the subscription review process and what you can expect over the next few months. I'll share some strategies that we're taking to try to mitigate the impact of a flat collections budget. And then I'll wrap up with some options that you have for following up with me and the subject teams after the forum to continue the conversation. So following that, we should have plenty of time for questions. So to get started, the main purpose of today's forum is to talk about subscriptions. Before we do that, I want to share a broad overview of what's funded by the Western Libraries Resource Access Budget, which I'll refer to as the collections budget, to help frame the conversation. So perhaps most obviously, the collections budget covers print and electronic books and journals. This includes books and journals that we've purchased outright, as well as large packages of ebooks or e-journals that we subscribe to. The collections budget also covers a large number of aggregator databases, like those that we get through EBSCO or ProQuest. These databases often include a mix of content like abstracts, full text articles, conference proceedings, book reviews, that sort of thing. And then we also purchase and subscribe to streaming media through vendors like Kanopy, and we purchase physical media. The collections budget supports some specialty formats, such as maps, and some specialized collections, such as course reserves, which support specific curricular needs at Western. And then when we can, we also support open access initiatives, such as the MIT Press Direct to Open ebook collections. And then lastly, the collections budget supports the backend systems that are needed to provide access to materials, like OneSearch, which is our catalog, the costs and processes that are associated with Summit and interlibrary loan, and the costs and processes for copyright payments. So hopefully this gives you a general idea of the scope of what's supported by our collections budget. So at Western, our collections budget, including the budget that supports those back-end systems, is roughly $2.6 million. So this chart breaks out how that money is spent. About 3/4 of the collections budget goes to subscriptions. Most of our current subscriptions are electronic, but we do still have a handful of print journals. And we review and manage the subscriptions through the subscription review process and the new subscription form, which I'll talk about more in a few slides. Whoops. The other quarter of the budget is spent on a combination of one-time purchases, access fees, and systems. The one-time purchases represented here in orange include things like books, videos, journal back files, maps, the things that we pay for once without ongoing costs. These purchases are managed through a variety of different selection and review processes outside of subscription review, and anyone at Western is welcome to place a request for a one-time purchase through the purchase request forms on the library's website. Access fees, which are here in green, include costs for interlibrary loan, summit, copyright payments, and other kinds of short-term access costs. This is how we pay for access to the things requested through interlibrary loan that we don't have in our collection locally. And then the last chunk of the budget goes to systems, which includes OneSearch, ILLiad, which is the software that we use for ILL and purchase requests, and the other back-end systems that we use to provide access to our collections. So you can see in this chart that subscriptions are by far the largest piece of the collections budget, which is true at most academic institutions. So I also wanted to share some more context about the subscriptions landscape that Western and other academic libraries are navigating. On the publishing side, over the past few decades, there's been a huge influx of new journals that often get bundled together by publishers into a single package of journals that can contain hundreds or thousands of titles. These packages contain a number of journals that we actively want to subscribe to, but also contain a significant number of journals that we wouldn't subscribe to otherwise. So even though the price of many of these packages is very high, since the packages are so large, the price per journal is relatively low, making it a bad financial decision to pay individually for only the titles that we actively want. So for example, in one of our smaller packages that has about 100 titles, if we were to break the package and subscribe to individual journals at list price, we could only subscribe to 8 to 10 journals before the cost would be equivalent to the cost of the package of 100 journals. These subscription packages are difficult to scale back or cancel, and they consume a large part of the subscription budget. Some examples of large journal packages that we have at Western are Taylor and Francis, Springer Nature, and Wiley. Additionally, publishers are rapidly consolidating, leaving fewer and fewer vendors for us to negotiate with, putting us at a significant financial disadvantage. Annual price increases on journal subscriptions have averaged 5% or higher year after year, which outpaces the growth of institutional budgets and therefore limits our ability to pay for subscriptions. And then finally, we've seen a consistent trend towards monetizing open access publishing models. Open access publishing agreements mean that anyone can access the scholarly content without hitting a paywall, which is great. But publishers are still asking libraries to pay for the content in a variety of ways. One example is an increase in read and publish agreements, where instead of, or in some cases, in addition to, paying for journal subscriptions, libraries or institutions also pay the publishing costs for Western researchers to publish under an open access license. So even though there are a lot of benefits to open access, for the most part, it doesn't result in significant cost savings for libraries. And then on the institutional side, academic libraries are committed to supporting the curricular and research needs of students, faculty, and staff. Oftentimes, there are only one or two options for subscribing to specific journals or content that's needed to support the curriculum and research, which does not leave us with a lot of leverage when we're negotiating with vendors. And since publishers know that we need to support the needs of our institutions and that our access options are limited, they don't feel enough pressure to change their cost or access models. And then all of this is set against the fact that library and higher ed budgets are not increasing at the same rate as inflation on subscriptions, making it impossible to continue to pay for our existing subscriptions portfolio. So with all that background information, I'll shift to talking about our specific budget situation and the annual subscription review process at Western. And then I'll also remind you to please feel free to add questions as you think of them to the chat, and we can talk about them at the end of the slide deck. So with our current spend on subscriptions, which is just under $2 million, annual inflation is about $100,000 every year. So without annual increases to our collections budget to keep up with inflation, we can't pay for all of our existing subscriptions. So even without budget cuts, if the collections budget remains flat, which is our current scenario, we need to make about $100,000 of subscription cancellations every year. And so this is a very challenging situation to be in. To share some additional history and context, the collections budget did receive additional funds in the recent past. In fiscal year 22, we received a small infusion of one-time funds, which helped delay the need for cancellations, but did not increase the base budget. In fiscal year 23, the collections budget received a base increase of about $130,000, which helped to bolster the budget. And then until fiscal year 24, we were able to carry forward unspent funds to help cover inflation and postpone the need for cancellations. So we were projecting that this carry forward would help us get by until fiscal year 27 or 28, when we would be in a similar situation to where we are now. So then moving to the middle of the slide, at the end of fiscal year 24, 2 years ago, university administration rolled up carry forward from across the university. So not just from the library, but from all departments in order to balance the budget for fiscal year 25. Our collections carry forward, which again, we'd been planning to use to postpone cancellations for a few more years, was redirected to cover instructional costs across academic affairs. And so as a result, instead of facing cancellations in fiscal year 27 or 28, we needed to start identifying subscriptions to cancel in fiscal year 25, so last year. Last year, we needed to identify $29,000 in cancellations, and the decisions that we made last year were implemented this year in fiscal year 26. Moving forward, we'll need to identify roughly $100,000 in cancellations every year. So how do we make these decisions? At Western, we engage in an annual subscription review process to review both existing subscriptions and new subscription requests, with the goals of making changes to our subscription portfolio to meet the following year's budget and also to align with curricular and research needs as best we can. So the process was developed in 2019 and implemented in 2020. Last year, the Library Scholarly Resources Group, which is a committee of library faculty and staff in the Teaching and Learning and Collection Services divisions, reviewed the existing process and made some updates that will hopefully allow us to respond more efficiently to significant subscription price increases and enable us to better review our large journal packages. But the timeline and mechanisms for university feedback remain the same as previous years. So the process has 4 major stages. The first stage, which is internal to the library and actually starts the spring prior to the next year's review cycle, is data collection. We collect cost per use, average annual price increase, and overlap with other resources for all subscriptions that are eligible for cancellation the following year. Additional quantitative and qualitative data, such as whether the content can be borrowed via interlibrary loan, or evaluating how supportive the publisher is of open access, for example, can be collected for specific subscriptions that members of the Scholarly Resources Group want to review in more depth. We then move into the second stage, the draft list generation. The subject teams and a group of collections personnel review all of the subscriptions and make recommendations for what they think the most strategic cancellation decisions are, based on the data and also the subject team's knowledge of the curriculum and faculty research interests. We talk through the recommendations as a group to ask each other questions and also to share additional context before completing the draft list. In addition to possible cancellations, new subscription requests submitted through the year are also included on the draft list for university feedback. So even though we're in a cancellation environment, we want to keep up with Western's evolving curriculum and research needs as best we can, and understand the importance of reviewing and soliciting feedback on new subscriptions. So for example, even though we needed to identify cuts last year, we still decided to add 4 new subscriptions based on survey feedback and curricular need. So the draft review list includes all the new subscription requests and a mix of existing subscriptions that would give us a few pathways to meeting our cancellation target. This takes us to stage 3, the feedback period. So the last week of February this year, we will share our draft list with the university community and ask for folks to provide feedback via a survey. The list and survey will be open for a month and will ask respondents to rank specific subscriptions to retain or to add to the collection. It also includes opportunities to suggest new subscriptions and opportunities for open-ended feedback about the list or about the review process in general. After the survey closes, we'll move to the decision-making phase, where the survey results are shared with the Scholarly Resources Group. Some examples of the types of information that we look at from the surveys include how many people requested that we retain a particular title, how cross-disciplinary the requests were, and then the reasons that folks provided for wanting to keep or add a subscription. We consider the survey data alongside the other data that we collected, as well as any vendor-specific factors to make as holistic of decisions as we can about cancellations and additions to the subscriptions portfolio. It's not an easy process, but we try to be as nuanced as possible. So decision-making usually happens by May and is communicated to the university community before the end of the spring term. Many of our subscriptions are on a calendar year renewal cycle, so most of the decisions go into effect the following January. Much of the information that I just shared can be found on our subscription review website. The website includes a page for the current cycles updates. It's where you can find the new subscription request form, more detailed information about the data that we collect to review subscriptions, information about past cycles, and the FAQ. This is also where you'll be able to find the recording of this forum later this month. And I invite you to explore this website and to follow up with me if you have any questions or suggestions for expanding the FAQ. So before I wrap up the slide deck, I wanted to reaffirm that we are committed to providing access to the resources you need as best we can. So for example, if we cancel a journal or other content that you need, we'll do everything we can to provide access to it on demand through interlibrary loan or Summit. We're also committed to our one-time budget for things like books and media. We'll maintain our one-time budget allocation and will not draw from it to pay for subscriptions. And then finally, we're also committed to our other library services and programs. Resourcing for subscriptions will not come at the expense of other areas that support programs and services that are critical to the library's mission and to supporting student success. So while we're confronting the current budget realities at Western, we're also working with our colleagues in the Orbis Cascade Alliance, a consortium of 38 colleges and universities in the Northwest, to strategize around leveraging our collective power to improve the subscriptions landscape and negotiate for better pricing and access models. Additionally, Dean Kelly is also working with colleagues at the Washington Public Institutions on advocacy efforts at the state level for better funding for higher ed and academic libraries. If this is something that you're interested in talking about more, please do reach out to talk with us about advocacy efforts in this area. So as I mentioned previously, we will share the recording of this forum on the subscription review website later this month. Please feel free to revisit the recording and share it with your colleagues. We'll also update the FAQ with any questions that come up today and any questions that might need further investigation after this call. I'll also encourage you to reach out to your subject team with additional questions or to talk about your department's needs and priorities. The subject teams and I are happy to schedule a time to attend a department meeting for more discussion as we navigate this challenging budget environment. And then finally, I strongly encourage you and your colleagues to complete the subscription review survey, which is scheduled to come out on February 23rd. This is one of the primary ways that we have to collect feedback from university stakeholders to help us learn which subscriptions are the most important to you. So the survey will be announced through Library News, Western Today, and I'll send emails with the links to governance groups and faculty listservs. If you have additional suggestions for strategies for getting the word out, I would be happy to hear them. And that is the end of the slide deck. Here are some links and contact information that might be helpful as we turn to the Q&A portion of the forum. I'm happy to take the lead on responding to questions, but I'll also invite and welcome any library folks on the call to help respond to questions if I miss anything. Thank you.